How We Decide, by Jonah Lehrer. Introduction. Picture this. You're flying a Boeing 737 into Tokyo. 7,000 feet up, the city shimmers ahead. Suddenly, alarms blare. Red lights flash across the cockpit. Your left engine has burst into flames. Your heart pounds. You fight the panic, forcing yourself to run through the emergency checklist. Cut the fuel. Kill the power. But it's no good. The plane starts banking hard, the evening sky turning sideways. You try to pull her straight, but it's like wrestling with the air itself. And then you feel it, the unmistakable shudder of a stall. The air is moving too slowly over the wings. The metal frame of the aircraft begins to shriek and groan, a terrifying sound of physics winning its battle against steel. If you don't act now, you'll fall out of the sky. You have two choices, and you have less than a second to make one. Option 1. Increase the throttle. Try to gain altitude and speed, circle around, and stabilize the plane. But can your one remaining engine handle the strain? Or will it fail too? Option 2. Do the unthinkable. Steepen your descent. Point the nose of the plane toward the ground in a desperate bid to pick up speed. A fake nosedive to avoid a real one. It might give you just enough momentum to regain control. Or, it might accelerate you into a graveyard spiral, the G-force so intense the plane will disintegrate before it ever hits the ground. What do? The sweat is stinging your eyes. The stall is getting worse. You make your decision. You push the yoke forward and pray. This was the exact scenario that author Jonah Lehrer found himself in. And in that terrifying moment of choice, he managed to save the plane. He wrestled the aircraft back under control just 2,000 feet above the ground and brought it down for a rough, but safe, landing. Only then, with his hands still shaking and his heart racing, did he notice something strange. He wasn't looking through a cockpit window. He was staring at a $16 million flight simulator screen. The entire experience was a test. When he tried the scenario a second time, he made the other choice. He tried to gain altitude. The plane stalled, plunged left, and crashed into the city in a fiery wreck. The difference between life and death came down to a single decision, made in a split second of pure panic. It wasn't a decision he reasoned his way through. There was no time to calculate aerodynamics. It was a choice born of feeling, of intuition. And for centuries, we've been told that's the wrong way to decide. Today, we're going to explore a fascinating book called How We Decide, by Jonah Lehrer. This isn't just another book about decision-making. It's a journey deep into the human brain, into the hidden war that happens every time you choose what to do. What if I told you that our best decisions aren't purely rational, and that our worst mistakes often come from thinking too much? By the end of our time together, you'll understand the secret partnership between reason and emotion, and you'll walk away with a powerful new framework for making better choices in your own life. Book summary. For thousands of years, we've told ourselves a very simple story about how we make decisions. It's a story first told by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, and it goes like this. The human mind is a chariot. The charioteer is reason, calm, logical, and in control. And he's holding the reins to two powerful horses, our emotions. One horse is well-behaved, representing our positive feelings. But the other horse, that one is wild, destructive, and deaf to our commands. It represents our negative impulses. The job of the rational charioteer, Plato said, is to whip that dark horse into submission and keep the chariot moving forward. This idea, that reason is the master and emotion is the dangerous beast to be tamed, has shaped Western thought for centuries. From the philosopher Descartes, who wanted to purge the mind of all illogical feelings, to Sigmund Freud, who saw the rational ego as the rider trying to control the animalistic id, the message has always been the same. To make a good decision, you must be logical. You must silence your feelings. There's just one problem with this ancient story. It's completely wrong. And the proof can be found in a man named Elliot. In 1982, Elliot was a model husband and a successful manager at a large corporation. But a small brain tumor near his frontal lobe changed everything. The surgery to remove it was a success, but something was terribly wrong. Elliot's IQ was unchanged. He still tested in the 97th percentile. He could think logically and analyze problems perfectly, but he was now completely incapable of making a decision. Simple tasks became impossible. He would spend hours deliberating over which pen to use, blue or black. Choosing a restaurant for lunch became an all-day affair, as he meticulously analyzed every menu, seating plan, and lighting scheme, yet could never actually decide where to eat. His life fell apart. He was fired, his wife left him, and he ended up moving back in with his parents. The neurologist Antonio Damasio, who studied Elliot, was stumped. According to Plato's model, Elliot should have been the perfect decision-maker. His charioteer was fully intact, but his emotional horses were gone. Damasio discovered that after the surgery, Elliot was a man completely devoid of feeling. When shown pictures of severed feet or houses on fire, his body showed no emotional response. He felt nothing. And that was the problem. Elliot's tragic story revealed a profound truth about the human mind. A brain that can't feel, can't make up its mind. Far from being a distraction, our emotions are a crucial and indispensable part of the decision-making process. Reason without emotion is powerless. Think about a quarterback like Tom Brady, standing in the pocket with just seconds before a 300-pound linebacker crushes him. He has to scan the field, track multiple moving receivers, read the defensive formation, and decide where to throw the ball, all in an instant. He isn't solving a math problem. He doesn't have time to consciously analyze every variable. He's relying on something else. As Brady himself says, "You just feel like you're going to the right place, and that's where I throw it." That feeling is not random. It is the output of an incredibly powerful supercomputer, the emotional brain, the part of our mind that has been refined over hundreds of millions of years of evolution. It operates beneath our conscious awareness, processing millions of bits of data in parallel. When Brady glances at a receiver and gets a slight twinge of fear, that's his brain telling him the pass is too risky. The presence of a linebacker has been translated into a negative feeling. When he sees another receiver streaking across the middle of the field and feels a subtle burst of positive emotion, that's his brain telling him, that's the one. Every feeling is a summary of data. It's a visceral shortcut that allows us to make complex decisions quickly and effectively. So how does this system work? How does the brain generate these incredibly wise feelings? The answer lies in a tiny molecule called dopamine. For a long time, scientists thought dopamine was just the pleasure chemical. And it is. When you eat a piece of chocolate cake or listen to your favorite song, it's the dopamine system in your brain that makes you feel happy. But the neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz discovered that dopamine neurons are much more than that. They are prediction machines. In his famous experiments, Schultz would sound a tone, and a few seconds later, squirt a drop of apple juice into a monkey's mouth. At first, the monkey's dopamine neurons fired only when the juice arrived, the actual reward. But after a few trials, something amazing happened. The neurons started firing at the sound of the tone, not the juice. The brain had learned to anticipate the future. The dopamine neurons weren't just reacting to pleasure, they were predicting it. This system is constantly running in the background of your mind, learning the patterns of the world. It's figuring out that a dark cloud predicts rain, that a smile predicts friendship, and that a red light predicts you should stop. But here's where it gets truly interesting. The system learns by paying attention to its mistakes. Schultz found that if he played the tone but didn't deliver the juice, the dopamine neurons would suddenly stop firing. This created what scientists call a prediction error signal. It's the brain's way of saying, "Hey, I was wrong about that. Pay attention." That feeling of surprise, whether it's disappointment or delight, is one of the most powerful learning tools we have. Nothing focuses the mind like an unexpected event. This brings us to one of the most dramatic stories in the book. It's the early morning of February 24, 1991, during the Persian Gulf War. Lieutenant Commander Michael Riley is monitoring a radar screen on a British destroyer, protecting a fleet of Allied ships. It's been an exhausting shift, and his eyes are bloodshot from staring at blinking green dots. Suddenly, a new blip appears off the coast of Kuwait. It's heading straight for the American battleship, the USS Missouri. Immediately, Riley feels a surge of fear. His pulse races. His hands get clammy. There's something wrong with this blip. But here's the problem. The radar trace looks exactly like a friendly American A-6 fighter jet returning from a mission. It's flying at the same speed and has a similar radar signature. The A-6 pilots often turn off their identification systems to avoid Iraqi missiles, so there's no way to contact the aircraft. Riley has less than a minute to make a decision. If it's an Iraqi missile, and he does nothing, hundreds of sailors will die. If it's an American jet, and he shoots it down, he will have killed 2 innocent pilots. He stares at the screen, watching the blip get closer and closer. Time is up. He can't explain why, but his gut is screaming that this is a threat. He trusts his feeling. Fire 2 sea darts, he orders. The missiles launch. Seconds later, they intercept the target, which explodes and falls into the sea just 700 yards in front of the USS Missouri. Later, investigators would confirm that the target was indeed an Iraqi Silkworm missile. Riley had saved the battleship. But how did he know? Even he couldn't explain it. Years later, the cognitive psychologist Gary Klein analyzed the radar tapes. He discovered a tiny, almost imperceptible discrepancy. The American A-6 jets always appeared on the radar after a single sweep. But because the Silkworm missile flew at a much lower altitude, its signal was masked for a few moments by ground interference. It didn't become visible until the third radar sweep, just 8 seconds later than a friendly jet would have. Riley's conscious mind didn't notice this, but his dopamine neurons, which had spent weeks learning the pattern of the returning A-6s, certainly did. The 8-second delay created a prediction error. That feeling of fear was his brain's "oh shit" circuit firing, warning him that something was dangerously different. His emotions knew the truth long before his rational mind did. This is the incredible power of the emotional brain. Through experience and practice, it can develop an intuition that is astonishingly wise. Bill Roberti, a world champion in backgammon, chess, and poker, describes this process perfectly. He says that the key to his success isn't just playing a lot, it's the quality of his practice. After every single game, win or lose, he painstakingly reviews his mistakes. He knows that self-criticism is the secret to self-improvement. He is deliberately training his dopamine neurons, teaching them to recognize the patterns of success. But our feelings aren't perfect, and relying on them at the wrong time can lead to disaster. The same system that makes us brilliant can also make us fools. This is the dark side of emotion. Let me introduce you to Anne Kleinstiver. At 52, she was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, a condition caused by the death of dopamine neurons in the brain. Her doctor put her on a drug that mimics dopamine, and at first, it was a miracle. Her tremors disappeared. But then she discovered slot machines. Anne had never gambled before, but with her brain flooded with artificial dopamine, the slots became irresistible. Why? Because while our dopamine system enjoys predictable rewards, it gets even more excited by surprising rewards. A slot machine is the ultimate source of unpredictable rewards. Because the payouts are random, our dopamine neurons can never figure out the pattern. They keep getting surprised, and instead of getting bored, they become obsessed. For Anne, whose brain was already overstimulated with dopamine, this was a recipe for disaster. The surprising rewards of the casino triggered a massive chemical bliss, making the games excessively seductive. She lost over $250,000, exhausted her retirement savings, and sold everything she owned. She was an addict, completely hijacked by a flaw in her emotional brain. This flaw affects all of us, even without medication. It's why we see patterns where none exist. Take the hot hand in basketball. We've all seen it. A player makes a few shots in a row, and we're convinced they can't miss. The announcers talk about them being in the zone. Psychologists Amos Tversky and Thomas Gilovich decided to test this. They analyzed years of statistics from the Philadelphia 76ers and found absolutely no evidence of the hot hand. A player's chance of making a shot was completely independent of their previous shot. The streaks were just a figment of our imagination, our pattern-seeking brains imposing order on random noise. This same flaw makes us terrible investors. The stock market is a largely random system. But our dopamine neurons are convinced they can solve it. We see a stock go up for a few days and we perceive a trend, convinced we found a secret pattern. This is what leads to financial bubbles. Our greedy brains become so convinced they've solved the market that they take bigger and bigger risks, right before it all comes crashing down. And then there's perhaps the most powerful emotional flaw of all: loss aversion. Psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky discovered that, for the human brain, the pain of a loss is approximately twice as potent as the pleasure of a gain. In other words, losing $20 feels twice as bad as finding $20 feels good. This simple defect explains so many of our irrational choices. It's why contestants on the game show Deal or No Deal make terrible decisions. An analysis found that after a player suffers a big loss, say, eliminating the $1 million briefcase, they become excessively risk-seeking. The pain of that loss is so intense that they can't think straight. They reject perfectly fair offers from the banker, desperately trying to chase the feeling of a big win to erase the feeling of the loss, and they often end up losing everything. Loss aversion also makes us hold on to losing stocks for far too long. Selling a stock that has gone down in value makes the loss tangible and painful. So we postpone the pain, hoping it will recover, and our portfolio slowly fills with losing investments. The emotional brain is also dangerously short-sighted. It's built to overvalue immediate rewards at the expense of future consequences. This is why credit cards are so dangerous. Paying with cash involves an actual, tangible loss. Your wallet gets lighter. It triggers a small pain signal in the brain. But paying with a credit card is abstract. It anesthetizes the brain against the pain of payment. The insula, a brain region associated with negative feelings, doesn't react. And so, our desire for immediate gratification, the new pair of shoes, the expensive dinner, wins the argument every time. We buy what we can't afford, telling ourselves we'll figure out how to pay for it later. This is the essence of the famous marshmallow test. A 4-year-old is given a choice: 1 marshmallow now, or 2 if they can wait 15 minutes. Most can't resist. Their emotional brains scream for the immediate reward. But those few who can wait, who can use their rational minds to control their impulses, go on to have much more successful lives. They get better grades, earn higher SAT scores, and are less likely to have behavioral problems. They have mastered the art of self-control. So, if our emotions can be so wise but also so foolish, what are we to do? This is where the other part of our mind comes in. The rational brain, the charioteer. Its home is the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain right behind your forehead. This is the newest part of our brain, evolutionarily speaking, and it's what gives us the ability to think logically, to analyze problems, and to control our impulses. The story of Wag Dodge, a smoke jumper in 1949, is a perfect illustration of its power. Dodge and his crew were dispatched to fight a small fire in a Montana gulch, but the fire suddenly exploded, turning into an inferno racing toward them at 30 miles per hour. The men's primal emotion screamed one thing: run. So they dropped their heavy gear and started scrambling up the brutally steep canyon wall. But Dodge, a veteran firefighter, quickly realized it was hopeless. The fire was too fast, the hill too steep. His fear was telling him to run, but his experience told him that running meant certain death. In that moment, panic narrows our thoughts. It reduces our awareness to the most basic instinct: flee the fire. This is what happened to Dodge's men. They became fixated on reaching the ridge, even though it was impossible. But Dodge did something different. He stopped running. He resisted his primal urge. He turned to his conscious mind, the only part of the brain capable of creative, deliberate thought. And in a flash of insight, he came up with a new solution, something no one had ever done before. He took out a match, lit the grass in front of him, and created a small escape fire. As the new flames raced away from him up the hill, he stepped into the smoldering ashes, a thin buffer of burned land. He lay down, covered his mouth with a wet handkerchief, and waited for the wall of flames to pass over him. He survived, virtually unscathed. 13 of his men, who followed their instincts, were killed. Dodge's story shows the power of the rational brain in a novel crisis. When our experience and intuition are useless, when we face a problem we've never seen before, we must rely on our reason. This is what Captain Al Haynes and his crew did on United Flight 232, when a catastrophic engine failure destroyed all three of the plane's hydraulic systems, leaving them with no way to control the aircraft. The situation was unprecedented. There was no procedure in the manual for it. Their trained instincts were useless. But Haynes stayed calm, thought through the problem, and came up with a crazy but brilliant idea: to steer the massive plane using only the thrust from its two remaining engines. It was an incredible feat of rational problem-solving that saved 184 lives. But just as emotions have a dark side, so does reason. And the biggest danger of the rational brain is thinking too much. Psychologist Timothy Wilson conducted a simple experiment. He had college students taste and rank 5 different brands of strawberry jam. Their preferences closely mirrored those of trained food experts at Consumer Reports. It seems we are all natural jam experts. Our emotional brains instinctively know what tastes best. But then Wilson repeated the experiment with a twist. This time, he asked a new group of students to explain why they preferred one jam over another. He forced them to consciously analyze their first impressions. The results were shocking. All that extra analysis warped their judgment. The students now preferred the jam that the experts had ranked as one of the worst. Their correlation with the experts' rankings plummeted from a respectable 0.55 to a virtually non-existent 0.11. What happened? When we overthink a decision like this, our rational brain starts searching for reasons. We focus on variables that are easy to verbalize, like chunkiness or spreadability, even if we don't actually care about them. Having a chunky texture sounds like a plausible reason to dislike a jam, so we talk ourselves into believing it, ignoring the pure, holistic feeling of pleasure that our emotional brain provides. When you overthink at the wrong moment, you cut yourself off from the wisdom of your emotions. You lose the ability to know what you really want, and you end up choosing the worst strawberry jam. This isn't just about jam. It happens with big decisions too. People think too much about buying a house and focus on easily quantifiable facts like square footage, while undervaluing how they'll actually feel during a long daily commute. The rational prefrontal cortex is a powerful tool, but it's also a limited one. The psychologist George Miller famously showed that our conscious brain can only handle about 7 pieces of information at any one time. When we give it too much data, it gets overwhelmed. This is why more information isn't always better. The flood of detail from an MRI scan often leads doctors to focus on minor spinal abnormalities that aren't actually the cause of a patient's back pain, resulting in unnecessary and ineffective surgeries. They would make better decisions with less information. So, we have a mind with 2 powerful, competing systems: an emotional brain that is fast, intuitive, and wise from experience, but also prone to biases and short-sightedness, and a rational brain that is slow, deliberate, and creative, but easily overwhelmed and prone to overanalysis. How do we decide which one to use? This brings us to the final lesson of the book, perfectly embodied by the game of poker. Michael Binger is a particle physicist with a PhD from Stanford. He's also a professional poker player who has won millions. He represents the synthesis of these 2 ways of thinking. Poker is a game of math. It's a game of calculating odds and probabilities. When Binger started out, he relied on his analytical skills, playing only those hands with the best statistical odds. This is the rational brain at work, and it's essential for avoiding big mistakes. But poker is also an art. It's a game of people. The math can't tell you if your opponent is bluffing. It can't capture the subtle psychological tells, the shift in posture, the slight twitch of an eye. For that, you need your emotional brain. You need to rely on those inexplicable hunches that come from experience. Binger's journey to becoming a top player was about learning to master both sides of the game. He learned when to do the math, and when to trust his gut. He realized that the best decision-makers don't rely on a single strategy. They're like a fox, who knows many things, not a hedgehog, who knows only one big thing. The best decision-makers are flexible. They are willing to listen to the argument inside their own heads. They think about how they think. Commentary. So, What does this all mean for you and me? The central lesson of how we decide is that there is no universal solution to making good choices. Our brains are not a single machine. They are a team of rivals. We have the ancient, powerful, and often brilliant emotional brain, and we have the newer, more deliberate, and creative rational brain. The secret to good decision-making is knowing which part of your mind to consult for which problem. It's like having a toolbox. You wouldn't use a sledgehammer to fix a wristwatch, and you wouldn't use a tiny screwdriver to break down a wall. You have to use the right tool for the job. So let's make this practical. Here are a few simple guidelines drawn from the book that you can start using today. First, for simple problems, use your reason. If you're choosing between two virtually identical vegetable peelers, and one is half the price, don't listen to your emotions, which might be swayed by fancy packaging. Do the simple math. The rational brain is excellent for these kinds of clear-cut, quantifiable decisions. This is also why you should use it to defend yourself against your emotional brain's innate flaws, like loss aversion. Before you make a risky bet or reject a fair offer after a loss, take a moment, step back, run the numbers. Second, for complex problems, trust your emotions. This is the most counterintuitive lesson. When you're making a big, complicated choice, like which car to buy, which house to live in, or even which person to spend your life with, the sheer amount of information will overwhelm your rational brain. It will force you to oversimplify, to focus on one or two variables while ignoring dozens of others. Your emotional brain, however, can process all that information unconsciously. The best strategy is to gather all the data with your conscious mind, but then, give yourself time to let it digest. Go for a walk. Sleep on it. Distract yourself. Then listen to what your gut tells you. The feeling that emerges is not a whim, it's the result of an incredibly powerful computation. Third, for novel problems, go back to reason. If you find yourself in a situation you've never encountered before, like Wag Dodge facing the escape fire or Captain Haynes flying a plane without controls, your past experience won't help you. Your intuition is useless. This is when you must rely on the creative, innovative power of your prefrontal cortex. You need to consciously think through the problem and invent a new solution. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, always embrace uncertainty. The world is more random and unpredictable than our brains want to believe. It feels good to be certain, to pretend the argument in our head is settled, but that certainty is dangerous. It makes us ignore evidence that contradicts our beliefs. It makes us prisoners of our own preconceptions. Always force yourself to consider the other side. Actively seek out dissenting opinions. Continually remind yourself of what you don't know. The best decision makers aren't the ones who are always right. They're the ones who are best at learning from being wrong. That was a summary of How We Decide by Jonah Lehrer. We've certainly covered a lot of ground today, but I have to be honest with you, a summary like this is just the beginning. The real insights, the ones that stick with you, often come in the quiet moments when you're reading the book yourself. It's when a story hits you in a way you didn't expect, or a single sentence clarifies something you've been struggling with for years. This podcast is here to help you discover books that are worth your time. If anything we talked about today sparked your curiosity, I truly encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you understand the most important machine you'll ever own, your own mind. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable, it would mean the world to us if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book here on Billionaire's Bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.